So today we are quite curious as to know, how did you find out about this session? We're just wanting to check out how everyone found out about the session. So Ansi, would you mind just quickly, I think it's a poll that we've put there. Would you mind bringing up the first poll of the session? There are going to be a few questions, so make sure you stay awake because we're going to ask you some stuff. So hopefully Ansi can launch that poll from her end. We'll just check.
Hi Bridget, I've just launched it, so I can see that people are already putting in their responses.
Oh, cool.
I'll just talk you guys through what I'm seeing.
Awesome.
There's about 28 responses, 82% have voted. So at the moment, it looks like most of these have come from the FICT webinar invitation email, which is really interesting.
Okay, that's cool.
A couple from LinkedIn.
Ah.
There's a few that says others, so we'd be quite curious to know what this other, so where did you find out about us? Because we don't really know where our stuff ends up.
No, we don't. That's what we thought we might ask for once.
Yeah, so we know when people that receive our regular monthly newsletters, that's pretty obvious, but if you're coming from anywhere else, feel free to put it in the chat and just let us know where you have joined us from and where you found out about us.
Awesome. Thanks, Nancy. Cool. All right. Just good to know sometimes because we genuinely don't know sometimes where people are finding our stuff. So if you don't know who we are, we're the Effect, and we exist to make workplaces great. We're all about, I guess, the psychological health and well-being of those at work. I'm Bridget Jelly. I'm a psychologist. I'm very passionate about psychological health and safety in the workplace. I've been doing this kind of thing for a while now. It really floats my boat, and I particularly love to help out people at work. Because the workforce is the backbone of our country. And we also have Ansi Stodum, who will be in the background, and she's already talked a little bit so far, so she'll be running our polls for you and answering or letting me know if there's any questions or things like that. So if you've got any challenges as well, just chat and ask Ansi. She hopefully will be able to help out. Cool. All right. So I will move my screen once it lets me. So what's the session about? Well, there's kind of three things I thought would be quite useful to cover. The first one being the cost of caring. This is something that you may have heard of before. And it's predominantly about those who work in professions that help other people and what are the consequences of doing that as in a role. The second part of it is looking at how to protect ourselves and others. What are some things that we need to look out for or understand that might impact on the decisions that we make in our roles. And the last piece is self-care. We're going to talk a little bit about this, something that I personally think is really, really important, very, very important. In my training as a psychologist, this was one of the big things that I learned when I did my internship many years ago, was that self-care piece. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Okay, another question for you, because we like questions, right? Psychologists love to ask questions. I'm quite curious, who is actually here today? So what is your profession? So Auntie's going to bring up a poll, just so we can have an idea of what type of professions are in the room. So really keen to hear. We know that there probably be some HR, H&S, also leaders and other professions as well. Everyone is welcome, because this stuff can be applicable to anyone who works in a profession where they're helping other people. So I can't see the polls, by the way, Auntie, so you're going to have to tell me. Otherwise I'll keep talking.
Responses coming in. So we've got 80% already voted. At the moment, the majority is human resources at 50%.
Wow.
Health and safety, 22%. Again, I can see there's 22% others. So again, if you guys can just let me know, what are those others? What are your professions? So stop now. We've got 11% of our audience is identify as a leader or manager.
Yeah. Okay.
Rates pretty much stayed the same.
Yeah.
And I can share that very quickly if you guys are interested. You should be seeing this on your screen now. I've got someone that says financial mental. Interesting.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Wow. That would be interesting, actually. I think a lot of us don't realise, I mean, we think that your nurses, doctors, psychologists, social workers and things like that they do deal with a lot of people stuff, but there are a lot of other professions out there that deal with complex people issues and deal with people when they're not at their best or at their most stressed. Certainly if you work in the financial sector, I imagine you deal with some people who are very distressed about certain things. So really great to have you.
Sorry to interrupt. We've got someone here from Wellbeing Committee, which is really awesome because we are speaking to organizations about considering bringing something like this into the business.
Yeah.
We've got Rural Support Facilitator.
It's a wonder, is it? It's fantastic. No, it's really, really cool. It's really awesome to have you all here because, yeah, as I said, before, it's not only nurses and doctors and psychologists and social workers that deal with complex people stuff. There is a whole lot of other professions out there that I've discovered over the years that also deal with complex stuff. So, and quite typically, training and support is provided for medical professionals. So when they go through their training, they're trained in a lot of the stuff and how to deal with complex issues. But for other professions, there's a gap. They're not. So they're left to kind of almost fend on their own with some of the stuff. And some of the stuff can be quite curly, most definitely. All right, question for you. If you want to enter it in the chat box, I can see the chat box. What do you think is the most stressful occupation out there? What do you reckon? Enter it in the chat box. I'm quite curious to see what you think. Nurse, yeah. So you would have its stresses, yeah. What else? What else have you got for me? Chef, oh, yeah. They always look quite stressed. Social worker, yeah. Dentist, air traffic controller, yes, would not want that job. No, Lindsay. Any other thoughts out there? Pilot, yeah. School teacher, yes, I would personally find that quite stressful. Mental health worker, yeah. So obviously there's all sorts of research out there in terms of what are the most stressful roles around, and there's a lot of, I guess, factors that play into that. When I went hunting for the answers to these questions, and it does depend on what research you're looking at and what they're looking at and specifically within that research. But I did find one study that was done last year, actually, 2019, which found this as their result. So it's a survey from Purbox, and they looked at stress levels across the UK, and they had something like 16,000 respondents reply to this from over 50 different cities within the UK. And they found out that, what a surprise, actually. HR, human resources, is a profession that is right up there, followed by legal, and then retail. So yeah, when I saw that, I thought that's really, really interesting, very, very interesting data, because typically most people would think, emergency staff, medical staff, school teachers. But as I mentioned beforehand, there's a lot of other professions out there that we don't actually realise the stuff that they have to deal with. So there you go, a bit of information for you. That is one piece of research, though. There are lots of others as well. So when looking at the research around human resources and health and safety and other professions who deal with complex issues, there's actually not a whole lot of research. You can look at nursing, doctors, psychologists, social workers. There is heaps of research on us, heaps, but there's not a whole lot on human resources and human health and safety and other professions. There is quite a bit coming out now around the legal profession, I've noticed, having worked with a few lawyers, which is great. But one study that I did find, looking at human resources professionals and what the main stressors are these things here. So change, having to deal with constant change and with the business, within the business, having to often lead that process or execute that process. Dealing with layoffs, right sizing the organisation, getting the most out of our talent and all that kind of thing. That was one stressor. Another one is this dual allegiance bit. I think a lot of people don't realise that yes, you have one job title, but you do play lots of different roles when you are in human resources, and the same for health and safety and for lawyers and things. There's not just the everyday business, it's the other people component that you have to factor in as well. So that employee advocacy versus that business accountability can really put you in a pool, tug of war situation. Then the other one was perception, which I thought was really interesting. And what is stressful about this is that in other professions, they perhaps are not so clear on what human resources is, or what the function is, or or how they are perceived. And that perception sometimes for HR professionals can cause a little bit of stress as well. So those were 3. There were quite a few others as well, but I thought I'd just highlight 3 for us today to mention. I'm really curious, those of you who are in health and safety out there, what are your key stressors? Really keen to hear that, because you guys, from what I can see, there's not a lot of robust research around you. I don't know why. There's a lot of research in health and safety, but not a lot of research around those who work in the field, which is, yeah, a little bit bizarre. So yeah, if you are in health and safety or would know people working in health and safety, yeah, what are some of the stressors that are relevant to you? Feel free to put in the chat box there. Motivating a big team. Ooh, yeah, that would be hugely stressful. Similar to HR, change management especially. Yeah, can absolutely see that, most definitely. Hey, Bridget, just made it back into meeting. Lance, hello. Engagement of staff or lack of, yeah. Dealing with lack of care from others. Yeah, okay, absolutely. So I mean, like I say, every job has its stressors, and in some aspects we're trained to deal with them, in some aspects we're not, and that's absolutely fine. It's just bringing awareness to that. So I wanted to talk about, I guess, 4 different types of stressors that can come about in professions that we are not, that we don't typically think of that are stressful. And there's a lot of research into medical and emergency professions, but not a whole lot with other professions around this stuff here. But we know that this stuff does exist. So the 4 I wanted to talk about today, there's a few of them, but one is stress. Acute versus chronic stress. So what I mean by that is acute stress is when we feel stress for a short period of time. So something's happened at work. I don't know, maybe it's a day where we're laying a lot of people off, or we're implementing a massive change process, and that day is stressful. It's just a stressful day. We all have that. Chronic is when it is long-term stress. This is when things have been going on for quite a while, so a couple of months or more. And we know from a brain perspective that it's not so flash. We don't want to be sitting in a stress response for a long period of time. We also know there is a cost engaging with stories and lives of distressed and traumatized people. And that can often result in professionals experiencing similar symptoms to those of the people that they are supporting. So some of the effects of dealing with distressed employees, are subtle and can involve gradual change over time. And sometimes can affect your underlying beliefs even. So it can go that deep if we're not watching it and not careful. So burnout is a very real thing, and it is something that can typically sneak up on people. And I have read some research that burnout in human resources profession is something that is prevalent, absolutely. So what is it? It's basically the total depletion of one's physical and psychological resources. And it was first recognised as a syndrome among professionals in nursing and teaching. But we know that in other professions, it's absolutely, I've seen it myself with a lot of people, absolutely no one is immune to it. Doesn't matter what your job is. If there's a level of stress there and chronic stress, you can find yourself burnt out. So when you look at, human resources managers whose jobs are concerned with people and their problems, and they are prime candidates for burnout, to be honest. Empathizing with a person or being compassionate requires sharing that person's pain and suffering, and that sharing has ultimately sometimes consequences. And that brings me to my next one, which is this concept of compassion fatigue, which was coined by nurses in the 1950s. And what this is basically a decline in energy to care, which doesn't sound that flash, but it does happen. So over time, even the most compassionate person can suffer from compassion fatigue, where their capacity for empathizing with others is just diminished. So what this could look like is, exhaustion, depersonalization, detachment, reduced ability to feel, really. I had this myself when I worked in the Department of Corrections many years ago in the prison. It got to a point where you ran out of care. And when it gets to that point, hang on, something's not right here with me, I need to attend to this. So it is a very real thing. It's a very real thing that we need to attend to. And the last one that I think I'm seeing more of over the last couple of years, and I'm seeing it more in professions outside of medical. I'm seeing it in professions that I wouldn't even have imagined it, to be honest, and that's secondary trauma, which is indirect exposure to trauma. So you've got trauma, which is when you have been directly exposed to something that's traumatizing, so you're firsthand in that experience. Oh, sorry, I'll just move back. And then there's secondary trauma. This is more of a risk factor for people who are working with other people at the end of the day, because stuff happens, right? Stuff happens at work. You know, you get all sorts in the workplace, absolutely all sorts. Even this year, and I think about some of the things that I've heard, I think, wow, how do these people in the workplace deal with this stuff? So secondary trauma is the indirect exposure through someone else, essentially. It's like hearing about someone else's traumatic situation. And these symptoms can parallel post-traumatic stress disorder, if you're familiar with that. And they can be a bit contagious, unfortunately. And they have impacts on an emotional, physical, and behavioural kind of level. So I have seen a bit of a gap here in my own observations with secondary trauma, because a lot of people are being exposed but haven't had the training or support around A, how to recognise it, and B, what do you do about it so you take care of yourself. Again, typically in professions like medical emergency services, you're trained in this. You know all about secondary trauma. You know how to identify it in others and yourself, and you know what steps to take to fix it. So some of the symptoms, I guess, that you could see, some things, you know, they could include hypervigilance, avoidance, re-experiencing things, a change in mood. It can also, you know, result in you feeling guilty, angry. You know, you might have problems with sleeping, weight change, challenges with concentration and things, because you're distracted. And it can actually impair the immune system as well. So it's a very real thing, a horrendously real thing. But again, a lot of people aren't given a lot of training around it, or are running around out there wondering why they're feeling off and not that great. And it's because of this. It's because of the horrendous story that they've had to hear from someone else in their organisation of the most horrific thing that's happened to them. How can it not have an impact on you, right? How can it not? Even, you know, for myself, I hear all sorts of horrendous, you know, tragic stories. And, you know, I've heard a lot of them, but even so, it still even affects me. So what do you do about it? Well, I guess, first of all, it's being aware that, you know, you can be exposed to these things. You're not immune to it. There is no vaccine against these things either. That doesn't work. It's just usually a spontaneous thing that might sneak up on you. So various things you can do. You know, obviously self-care is really looking after yourself, utilising really healthy habits and things. Debriefing, so talking it through with someone. This one here, I guess a little footnote with it, is be careful who you debrief to, because remember I said with the likes of something like, you know, secondary trauma or vicarious trauma, they call it, you could essentially debrief someone else. I'm sorry, not debrief someone else, you could traumatize someone else. So you have to be very, very careful. You know, some of the situations that happen at home, at work, may not be appropriate to take home to talk to your husband about, because you could essentially traumatize them. And the last thing is, it's something I noticed with human resources and health and safety people, is go easy on yourselves. You just soldier on. You soldier on. It is, if you are feeling wobbly and not okay, it is okay. It is okay that you're a human being. It is normal to react in some way. And for me, a rule of thumb is, if work gets in the way of life, or life gets in the way of work, then maybe it's time to consider getting that extra support, whatever that might look like for you. All right, so those are 3 things. Really curious to hear from you guys, and I'm just going to pull my chat up again. I have to keep putting it down because it covers my PowerPoint, then I can't see what I'm talking about. We would like to know from you, which one is more of a risk factor in your work? So out of the 4 ones that I've talked about, stress, compassion, fatigue, burnout and secondary trauma, which one is more of a risk factor? So Auntie, would you mind putting the poll out if you haven't already.
It's just gone out, Bridget, so we've got responses coming in. You guys should all be seeing that in front of you on your screen. So I can see here at the moment, it looks like burnout is rating the highest, around 45%.
Yeah.
Compassion fatigue, interestingly, is the second highest.
Yeah.
Secondary trauma, next in stress. So stress and secondary trauma is about equivalent. Yeah. But burnout has been climbing. So burnout first in the rankings, then compassion fatigue, stress, secondary trauma.
Right. So, yeah. Cool. Well, not cool, but, great that we've got those responses. And your burnout, I think, has been particularly prevalent this year with the pressures that COVID-19 has placed on organisations, and particularly health and safety and human resources. You guys have been working at a pace through the rapid change that COVID-19 has forced on us. So burnout is definitely something that's very real. It can sneak up on you. In my experience of observation, it can sneak up on you. It's really a risk that I think as organisations we need to learn to manage better, because once you are burned out, and I'm sure a few of you will know this because you've seen people who have burned out or experienced it yourself, it is a long way back. It does take a long way back to come back from burnout, which is really unfortunate because it can be prevented. It can be prevented. So something to think about, and happy to send some more resources on burnout. Actually, there is a little questionnaire that you can do as a little checklist questionnaire to check in on yourself and also on others to see whether, hang on, are we getting close to burnout? Do we need to start putting something into place? So more than happy to send that out. That's what I use with my clients. Sorry, Nancy?
Just noticing there's a couple of questions heading your way, so just have a look at that chat box.
Okay, can burnout take years to get over? Yes. Yes. I don't know what the research says. I can't quite remember, but from working with a lot of individuals who have burnt out, you're looking anywhere, this is just my perspective, so please don't take it as gospel, is anywhere from 2 to 4 years. So it's not just a month or a couple of weeks. Proper burnout really does nail you to the wall. And from the people that I've worked with who have burnt out, they're probably never the same as they were before. It does change you. It changes you. So yeah, it can take a while to get there, but it also can take a while to get out. Do they phase from one to the other, another? Well, I don't know what you mean by that.
I think he might be meaning perhaps compassion fatigue. Might that move into burnout then? If I'm wrong, Andrew, put that in the chat box and maybe just explain a little bit more.
Okay. So I guess to answer what Auntie's posed there, yes. So compassion fatigue over a period of time can move on to burnout, and we know that burnout can move on to depression. So you can get clinically depressed if you don't tackle burnout. Burnout is severe exhaustion. And when your brain is exhausted, it starts to do some interesting stuff. Spot on. Oh, good work, Auntie. Thanks, Andrew. Great, cool. Keep the questions coming through, guys. I really like them. I can't always answer them, but I like to engage with those questions. So the next part I want to talk about is this protect part. So this is about looking out for certain things that might compromise you or trip you up because you're not entirely sure what is going on in a particular situation. That makes sense. So people are complex, right? And if you are dealing with people in your job, especially at the end of where things are going wrong, there's going to be a lot of different factors that are going on in the background. And I want to talk a little bit about some of those things just to bring awareness for you in order to help protect you and others. So this comes from the work predominantly that I do in supervising professionals. So I supervise, obviously the medical, other psychologists and things like that. But recently, it's come to my attention over the last year, quite a lot of HR people and lawyers are getting supervision, which surprised me, but I think it's very awesome. It's very, very awesome because, again, it's getting that support. There are lots of things I could cover in this section, but I'm only going to look at 3. And I warn you, I'm going to get a bit psychology-ish. So hopefully I won't lose you. I do get quite passionate about things, and I know I can get a little bit psychobabbly. So yeah, we'll just front foot that. The three things I'm going to look at are projection, which is a defense mechanism. You may have heard of it. It's about displacing one's feelings onto another person. Dual relationships, that's just about holding different roles, not necessarily formal ones. And boundaries, so you get what you tolerate. This is a big one, and a big one in terms of burnout. All right, so I guess just to explain, I'm going to talk about projection quite a bit more, but just to give you an idea about what I'm talking about, dual relationships and boundaries. Dual relationships is, I guess an example of this it could be, is that you have your role, your human resources manager or H&S or, you know, whatever. And sometimes you get to know people really, really well, right? And you establish friendships at work, which is positive from a mental health and wellbeing point of view. But it can also cause, I guess, an inner tug of war when your role is this, but you also now have another role of a friend, or in some instances, a relationship in the workplace. And that can start to play tug of war in your brain and place an emotional burden on you. It can often lead to, I guess, dissonance. And, you know, for a lot of you, you do hold that dual role of advocacy for your employee, but at the same time, accountability to the organisation, accountability to legislation and things. And it can be a bit of a balancing act. And I guess it's just being mindful of that. And that's where your boundaries come into it, because the boundaries essentially are about establishing, I guess, or delineating personal from professional roles. And this is where sometimes things can get a bit blurry for us. If your boundaries aren't clear, you know, how far do you go to help someone? How far do you go? Someone is, you know, not great. Do you go around to them, their house and make dinner for them? I have had people do this, by the way. You know, how far do you go? And if we fail to set boundaries, we can start to feel, unhelpful or negative feelings, such as feeling used or resentful. Things don't work out. So it's about being really clear about what your role is and what your limits are. Do we know when our boundaries are being pushed? Typically, you will know because you'll feel mighty uncomfortable. There'll be some feelings there. There'll be some dissonance in your mind about, okay, hang on, I'm not feeling right. And I guess it's about paying attention to that because it may mean that a boundary has been crossed there. So boundaries are really, really important. We talk about this a lot in psychology. Obviously, you'd want a psychologist to have pretty good boundaries, same with any medical professional. But again, this, I think, applies to a lot of roles out there. I don't think it's just us anymore. All right, so projection, I picked this one because it's an interesting one. Hopefully, I'll explain it in a way that you guys don't get confused. So projection is a person essentially pushing onto you their uncomfortable beliefs about themselves. So it's usually an unconscious thing. So it's something that I'm feeling that I don't like, I don't want to admit or go there, but I'm going to push it onto you instead. It's a really great way of avoiding responsibility and accountability. And it can look like, you know, misdirection, blaming, passive aggression, distortion, all that kind of thing. It essentially is a defense mechanism that happens. It happens quite a bit. So I guess I'm going to try something with you. We'll see how it goes to better understand the meaning of projection. I'll give you an example where I'm going to get you to actually do something. So what I want you to do is I want you to point at something. So like I'm doing, point at something with your index finger. So when you're pointing at something, there's one finger pointing away from you, but there's three other fingers pointing to you. Can you see that? So one finger pointing away, but there's three fingers pointing to you. So what am I talking about here? Well, it's a way of saying that everything that you say to others, you're also saying to yourself, but to a greater degree. Both when you are looking at negative qualities in other people or positive qualities. I guess seeing these qualities is possible because you have them as well, if that makes sense. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to detect them in the first place. Therefore, when you find someone, say for example, who's maybe secretive or standoffish, is it possibly because you're being secretive and standoffish? If you learn to listen to yourself and understand that when you feel someone has been unfair or selfish or irresponsible, it is possibly because you maybe perhaps are being these things. And you will succeed in more in being compassionate towards different people and improve how you relate to them when you understand this stuff a bit more. So a potential common scenario that I see in some professionals and organisations is how people judge the organisation, right? So an organisation is quite, well, it's faceless. It's absolutely faceless. And human resources people and H&S people and leaders, they are often the face. So you're it. So you become the representation of that organisation. And essentially, that is where a lot of frustration and unhelpful feelings may get directed to you. So you may get, blame type comments or, negative comments and things, which can start to wear you down, right? That's when your compassion fatigue starts to kick in. And as we've talked about before, this whole concept of, it's your fault, it's a huge way of projecting onto other people, which is also letting that person off the hook, essentially. So whenever they want to blame you for something, try to switch the conversation around into a matter of responsibility. From responsibility, we are then able to build out from blame. I guess a trick with projection is, and hopefully I've explained it okay, if you can work on how you may be potentially projecting sometimes onto other people and realizing, what it is that you may be doing, because we all do it, right? It's just a natural thing that we do. Then you are better positioned to understand when others are projecting onto you. So for example, in a moment, a colleague approaches you and tells you that, or suggests that you've been really harsh about something that you've implemented. You'll be able to, okay, all right, take that away, all right, they've said I've been really harsh, but are they in reality saying or realising, or maybe not, well, they won't be realising that maybe they've been harsh in judging you for implementing that change. So are they projecting that onto you? So the main thing with projection is about always just questioning yourself and looking at yourself. Hang on, these comments that I'm making about other people, is this me? Am I doing it? This is a really useful thing to think about when you're dealing with conflict. I see this quite a bit when team members are not getting on and there's some conflict of things, and they're throwing out certain stuff left, right, and centre, and quite often some of that stuff is them, but they are projecting it onto the other person because it is just easier to do that than admit that it's me that has that feeling. So what do you do about it? Well, first of all, a really strong, powerful technique is recognising in yourself when you are doing it. If you're starting to criticise, label, or push thoughts on to other people, stop the bus. Is that perhaps some things that I'm doing? If you are on the receiving end of it, because sometimes it feels quite uncomfortable, again, you'll get like a kind of feeling, don't engage with it. So don't get defensive back, is what I mean by that. Technique that we use is roll with resistance. So quite often, projection is a defensive mechanism. So that means the other person will typically jump into a defense or attack stance as well. And it's almost like a tennis match where the ball keeps going over the net. Drop the ball, don't go there. Recognize it for what it is. This is perhaps a defense mechanism on their part. I am not going to react, because at the end of the day, it's most of the time not about you. When someone else is projecting, it's not about you. This is about them reacting to something. Okay, so hopefully I haven't looked at the chat box. Hopefully I've explained that in a way that wasn't too complicated. Just something to think about. Look it up. It's very, very interesting. There's probably some videos on YouTube and things that can explain it better than I did. But it's certainly something that I see a lot in the workplace, and people don't really understand what's happening. And it's responsible for a lot of conflict a lot of the time. All right, so a question for you. So type your answer in the chat box there. What types of strategies are you engaging in to protect yourself from challenging or complex situations that you deal with in the workplace? Really keen to see what kind of things that you're doing at the moment. So I mentioned on the slide back there, I'll just click on my slide. Obviously self-care strategies, recognizing in yourself when things are not right, not engaging in conflict and things like that, and realizing, I guess, perspective taking. It's not actually about you. So anyone got any answers to that? I'm just checking the chat box now. What types of things are you doing when you come up with a difficult situation at work? What type of strategies do you employ? No one? Too shy to answer? Are you getting any answers privately? Auntie?
Hey, no, I can't see anything on my end, but we do have the fourth poll if you'd like to do it that way instead.
Okay. Oh, no, hang on, there's a few coming through. Think about it overnight. Yeah, I love that rule. My father-in-law taught me that one. He's an engineer. Always think about it overnight. Don't rush to make a decision. Allow time to think through things. Yeah, again, take that time. Don't react. Walking away. Yeah, sometimes that's the best thing to do. Yeah. And again, taking time. That's a really, really good strategy. Yeah, definitely. Okay. Not take it personally. Yes. Yes. I see a lot of people early on in their careers. I used to do this as well. You take it personally. It's not about you. It's typically not about you. That's actually a saying I say to myself quite a bit. Deep breath in the moment and pause. Yes, breathing goes a long way. Love the breathing. Awesome. Cool. Okay. So yeah, something to think about. What strategies do I need to be putting in place to protect myself from some of the complex and challenging people situations that I come up against in the workplace? Because you do come up against some of them for sure. All right, so the last kind of component I want to talk about today is the self-care piece, which we all know about, obviously. I found this quote, I really like it. Self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. I really like this because quite often I think we just chug on through as much as we can. And are we actually giving the people the best of us at the end of the day? So having a look at, okay, what's some different ways that we can look after ourselves. There's heaps of different ways. Again, I've just picked four, just a handful of things to share with you today. One is you're looking for some kind of circuit breaker. This is in the moment strategies. There's quite a few that people would use. People have mentioned breathing already. Breathing's actually incredibly powerful because what it does is it starts to shut off that kind of part of your brain that gets a little bit out of control. That amygdala, if you know it, I'll use that term. Not everyone may know it, but breathing slowly and considered can really start to slow things down in your brain and stop that release of all that adrenaline, which then amps you up even more. So breathing is fantastic. I couldn't recommend it enough. A technique that you can use is something called the box breathing technique. So literally find a square or draw a square, and it's breathing in for 3, hold for 3, breathe out for 3, hold for 3. And you just keep going around. And you're using like a box or a square because it helps to guide you and focus you in the balancing out the breathing in, the holding, and the breathing out. Can't recommend that one enough. Another technique is called name it to tame it. This one is quite a funky one. It's where you name what's feeling or emotion that you've got right now. So by naming the emotion, you're essentially taming it, or you're diffusing its power over you. Because when you get into an emotional state, your kind of primitive part of your brain turns on a bit, which means the front part of your brain turns off, which you don't want. Because that's where you do all your thinking and problem solving and all that kind of stuff. So by thinking about what you're feeling, you then turn your thinking brain on. So name it to tame it. So for example, if you're doing a webinar like this and you feel nervous, the quickest way to deal with those nerves is to say, okay, I'm doing nervous at the moment. I don't know if you noticed my language there. The verb I used was doing instead of I am or I'm feeling. Again, that's another technique to try and diffuse or detach you from the emotion so you can just see it opposed to be locked in it. So that's another technique that you can use in the moment to take care of yourself. Other techniques I've seen trying to snap the circuit in your brain a little bit is, people might have hair ties. I've got one on mine. On your wrist, you snap it and it can sometimes bring you out of that or stop that process in your mind. It could be that you fiddle with a ring or an earring or something along the lines of that. So that using your senses basically to short circuit the emotional hijack that you experience in your brain when you're dealing with a complex situation. Professional supervision. This might be foreign to some of you. In our field, it is a must-have. I've been doing this for years. It's just this all we really know. And I've realised over the last couple of years that there are a lot of professions out there who just don't get access to this, which is just a shame because they deal with just as complex stuff as us, but they're not getting that professional supervision. So that's a formal, ongoing process. It's not like a one and done thing. It's a journey, which I'll talk a little bit about in a minute. The other thing is self-care education for professionals. So not just generic resilience kind of workshops or generic well-being workshops. It's stuff targeted at professionals and the types of things that they deal with and equipping them with the skills. So I've actually surprisingly done a few of these over the last couple of years, and they've been very rewarding because as I said, there's a lot of people out there who don't get the training and development. They just don't have access to it that we do. And if they could have access to it, I think it would certainly help a lot in preventing things like burnout, compassion fatigue, and the effects of secondary trauma. And another option is, well, this is our one, but I just sort of put it there as a wellbeing tool, as a 5 to Thrive. So always keeping on top of, I guess, the 5 main things that keep you good as a human being, and that's the sleep, which I see a lot is a bit of an issue. Guys, get good sleep. What you eat, the brain's an electrochemical device. Whatever you put in there is going to muck around with the chemistry. What you do in terms of exercise, we know exercise is incredibly powerful for the brain. The evidence out there is compelling in terms of what it can do for your mental health and well-being. So I do work with a lot of CEOs and senior leaders, and quite a few of them have said to me, if it wasn't for the exercise that we do, we wouldn't be able to do the jobs that we do. I was like, wow, that makes sense why you run these ultra marathons and things. They do that so they're able to cope and manage and be more resilient in terms of the jobs that they do and deal with the stress that they have to deal with. And the last part is, I guess, your mindset, how you think. Is tapping into that. Quite often we don't really think about our thinking. It's quite useful to do that because your thoughts can go all sorts of places. Your internal chatter is really, really important. The type of language you use with yourself is really important. For example, if I use the word problem in my brain, it'll activate certain parts of my brain that will then activate certain chemicals that will not make me feel that flash. But if I replace the word problem with challenge, I'm going to activate different parts of my brain that will set off different chemicals that gives me a different feeling. And in the end, I may actually respond differently. So really keeping an eye on your well-being. So those are our 5, which we've picked up in the research, help to contribute to well-being. Actually, did I mention 5? I mentioned 4, didn't I? I've missed one, the connect piece. Oh, how can I miss that one? That one's the one that's been kind of centre stage the last few months, is connections, so social connections. And there's a bit of research that came out lately that showed that connecting or social connections is one of the key factors to living a long life. So if you want to live longer, make sure you have good connections. And there's kind of 2 elements to that piece. One is the connections that we have with those tight connections with your family and or friends. Those are the people that you can call upon for anything, and vice versa. Those are really important. But it's also those random connections that contribute to your well-being. So that's when you're walking down the office and someone from another department walks past you and giving them a smile or saying hi. Or when you're in the lift, how are you doing? Or what do you do here? Or whatever. Those random connections also contribute to better well-being, which is pretty cool. Okay, so supervision. I thought I'd dive into that one because that one is probably one that you may not be aware of too much, or you may be. I'm not sure. I'm making an absolute assumption here. So supervision or professional supervision is, I guess, it creates mindful supervisees. It's about self-reflection, promoting learning, building self-awareness, and again, monitoring that well-being piece. So self-reflection, I guess, is a cornerstone of supervision. Reflection is thinking about something that has happened and considering the implications in more detail. So developing the ability to be self-reflective is an important part in supervision, as it promotes critical thinking, ethical decision-making, and problem solving. There's lots of different models of how you can reflect. You might have heard of a few of them, Kolb's model of reflection. So that reflection just doesn't be like a continuous just lots of different chatter. Reflection, it can be quite structured, so that you can get the full benefit out of it. I'm just trying to think of other types of reflection that you may have heard of. Oh, after action review, you might have heard of that type of reflection. That's where after something has occurred, you ask questions like, what did we set out to do? What happened? What went well? What went badly? What have we learned from this exercise? What will we do differently next time? That's another one. There's a Gibbs reflection model, which looks more at what happened, what were my thoughts and feelings around it, what went well, what didn't go well, what have I learned, what am I going to do differently. So supervision is a great forum for debriefing with someone around things like that. I guess it also provides a restorative function as well, where through the supervision process, the supervisor can focus also on those emotional demands of the work that we do and the well-being. So it assists people to monitor their own well-being as well, so we avoid burnout. And also looks at things in your wider context as well, because sometimes it's not just work, it's an interplay of lots of different things that are going on, because they're all linked. They are all linked. So professional supervision is definitely something that has a lot of benefits for it. And it's just unfortunate that a lot of professions don't have access to that. All right, so really curious, another poll. What kind of self-care strategies have you all been engaging in? I'm really interested to know what you've been doing to take care of yourselves. Auntie, do you want to pop that poll up?
Yep, it's up.
Awesome.
Just launch that. Seeing a couple of responses coming through. We've got general wellbeing, activities and professional supervision. Okay, so there's quite a few people that do undertake professional supervision. I've got 4 people so far.
Yeah.
I've got a couple on debriefing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Nothing so far around education and training around complex people challenges. So general activities is at 67.
Yeah.
Then it's professional supervision and debriefing.
Yeah.
I'm going to end this now and then I'll share the screen so that you'll all be able to see what strategies people are engaging in.
Cool. As long as you're engaging in some strategies. That is the main thing at the end of the day. So can everyone see that poll, Auntie?
Yep, they can all see that. Can you not see it?
No, I can't see any of the polls. I don't know what happened there. No, that's all right.
We've got 17 people that have said general wellbeing activities.
Yeah. Cool.
And 4 professional supervision and 3 debriefing, which is great. So I've stopped sharing that now.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Thanks for that. It's just really interesting to know what kind of things we are doing, because it is an important part of doing your job well. It is a critical part. That's certainly something that I learned. And also for some of us, it's an ethical part of our jobs. If we want to do the best and the right by others, we have to do the same for ourselves. So I like my quotes. Investing in your own growth and self-development isn't selfish. It is called self-care. It is self-care, folks. And if you're not going to do it for yourself, who is at the end of the day? Cool. All right. So that's pretty much it. I hope it all made sense. I guess a good time is to open it up to the floor. Has anyone got any questions for me that I could hopefully answer? If you want to type them into the chat box there, you can either do it privately or for everyone to see. Feel free to do so. So any questions? Shoot them through. And while people are thinking and typing, if you want to connect with us, we're on all the social stuff. Auntie does our newsletter every month, at the beginning of the month. She does an awesome newsletter. It's really, really interesting. So if you haven't subscribed to that, I really recommend doing it. It's a really good read. She really taps into some really real stuff out there that we're dealing with and provides some really cool information. And if you want to know more about professional supervision or self-care education for professionals, just shout out, let us know, and we can send you some information around that as well. Cool. So I've got no questions. I've been let off the hook. Wow. That's easy. Oh, hang on. Is there an easy tool to find out if someone is stressed or burned out? Okay. Is there an easy tool to find out some? So you mean like an assessment, like a questionnaire type tool? If you're meaning that, yes, there are some. I can send some through. I think I can send those ones through. Yeah, there is. I mean, if it's suitable or appropriate in your setting, you can get people to fill out a questionnaire that will assess their level of stress, burnout, and those kind of things. Yep. Typically, if it's an observation thing, it's noticing when people are not behaving themselves. And usually if they're not themselves for a month or so, then that's also a red flag. Something's up, something's not quite right. Okay, exactly, cool. All right, then we'll look at sending some resources around that to you guys. Do you have any suggestions on resources for self-care education professionals? Yes, we can send you some stuff on that as well. Absolutely, yep, definitely. Cool. Any other questions? Otherwise, it's a wrap for today. I'll wait a couple of minutes. And supervision, yes, we'll send that through to you as well. Yeah, definitely.
Hey, Bridget, do you mind if I jump in super quick?
Of course.
Annoying. I'm just thinking about the stress question that was out there.
Yep.
I'm aware that we have an assessment that we use that I believe is available more
Yep.
broadly. And I'll let you respond individually to that. But I'm just thinking in terms of when I put assessments together, one of the things that I have to do is assess people's stress with as few questions as possible. So what I've learned over my time building assessments is actually just asking someone whether they're experiencing stress or how regularly they're experiencing stress. It's as simple as that. That has actually been shown to be a very good indicator of their general well-being and even up to their physical health as well. People generally understand what stress means, so it's not an ambiguous term. And if they are telling you, yes, they are experiencing stress, and yes, they are experiencing it quite regularly. If you ask them something like, are you experiencing stress these days? And they say, no, not at all. Or they say, yes, I'm experiencing a lot of stress. Then you can trust that. That is a good indicator in itself. So you don't always have to have a formal tool.
Yeah, great. That's awesome, Auntie. Thank you. That's really, really cool. Cool. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Take care of yourselves. Really, take care of yourselves. If you have any questions afterwards, just shout out. Honestly, flick us an email. More than happy to have a chat. We'll answer any questions. Quite often after these things, sometimes you go away and you start thinking. So yeah, thank you very, very much for your time today, and enjoy the rest of your week. So Auntie and I will stay on for a few minutes if anyone else has got any questions, and then we'll webinar.
Bridget, I can see there are a few more questions. So for Rachel, Rachel asked, do you have any suggestions on resources for self-care education for professionals and supervision as well?
Yep. No, yes, we do have some resources for both of those. We have some information around that. So yeah, we could send some information out to everyone. Cool.
And I've got another question, a private question. What is the best strategy for someone who projects and accuses you of something, then walks off afterwards? So someone that accuses you of something and then they walk off. What is the best approach?
Oh gosh, that's not great. So they accuse you of something and then so they project it on you, then they leave. Wow, that's someone who's ultimately very defensive, isn't it? If you can, it's getting the opportunity to get in front of them again. And what you do is you invite them to explain or talk a little bit more about how they're feeling. And you sit there and you listen and you do not say a thing. And what you can do is, it does take a bit of time though, is you sit there and listen, and what they do is they will talk their way for quite a long time, and they almost talk their way out. And then at the end of that, it's just asking them a few questions. So really effective questions. It doesn't have to be many, that will prompt them to reflect on their feelings and why they are feeling. So short answer, if you can have a chat with them or get in front of them again and give them the opportunity to speak and literally zip it. Listen to everything they have to say. Because when they are talking to you, they have to articulate their internal chatter. And when they're talking to you, they quite often start to reflect and realize what it is that they're actually thinking and feeling and saying and doing. So yeah, that's a technique I would use. Cool. Any other ones, Auntie?
No, I can't spot any other ones in there. Just a lot of thank yous to you, Bridget.
Oh, cool. And thank you, everyone. It's great to have you there, and thank you, Auntie, for helping. Cool. All right, shall we if everyone is all good, we might shut down the webinar. And as I said, yeah, feel free to drop us an email or give us a call at some point if you've got any further questions. Cool. I actually don't know how to stop it. End. Are we ready, Ansi?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. All right, we're going to be ending the webinar, everyone. Take care.
Bye, everyone.